I watched my wife while I sat at the large mahogany table and lightly tapped my fingers on the smooth surface. Camille grinned and handed me the coffee pot in such a casual manner. My gut twisted just pouring the coffee because they were so contemptuous, as if I were merely a servant in my own marriage. With a tone full of condescension, she remarked, "Dear, sit at the back." A laugh reverberated across the space, mingling with the sound of crystal glasses clinking and the rustle of exquisite linen napkins. Camille's family, a haughty group of business elites, hardly acknowledged me. Were overly preoccupied with themselves and overconfident in their own abilities. Gerald, Camille's father, sat at the head of the table, his silver hair meticulously combed back, his black. He was a man who discussed acquisition numbers and boardroom plans in a suit made to perfection. And I had his approval. Never really earned it. Lorraine, Camille's mother, used a handkerchief to dab at the corner of her lips. She had always regarded me with thinly veiled contempt, as if the diamond bracelet caught the warm glow of the chandelier. After Camille married, below her station, her older brother Lucas, also known as the Golden Child, was born. Inherit the empire, he was so preoccupied with browsing through his emails, stock price checks, and other phone calls were more important than the man who had been married to his sister for 5 years. This 5-year period of perfectly calibrated phrases that made me swallow my pride in the name of harmony. I had done a good job of being the understanding husband who remained in the background while his wife's family was in charge. But tonight was going to be different. I looked at my watch and a small smile crept across my cheeks, the corner of my lips. They were unaware that the chat would cause their world to change in ways they could not have predicted. Continued without me, mentioning a significant purchase and an important commercial transaction that they were ready to finalize. I listened to their voices as they buzzed around me, full of schemes and self-assured confidence. Attention, but I found the irony of it all amusing. So as the dining hall doors opened, the audience fell silent. Richard Connor, the finely dressed man who strode into his presence and demanded instant attention, the CEO of the business they were trying so hard to negotiate with, entered with the demeanor of a man who understood his significance as his eyes met mine. But he froze, and the change was slight. His face initially showed a glimmer of familiarity, but it soon crystallized into a more intense astonishment. Perhaps even his hesitancy was observed by Camille's family. Observed him intently, their composed faces hardly concealing their interest. "Aren't you the proprietor of?" Richard's voice trailed off as he realized that he was finally. A sudden strange hush descended upon the gathering when Lorraine's champagne glass broke off her fingers and hit the "all eyes were on me" as I laid the coffee pot on the marble floor, which was almost poetic. The only thing that broke the oppressive silence was Camille's smirk, which softly muffled the sound of porcelain and meeting. Gerald cleared his throat, and something much less certain took its place. He continued slowly, his voice strained. "There must be some mistake," his grasp tightening around his fork. "This is just my—" Richard was staring at me instead of Gerald, and even though my son-in-law has nothing, I suddenly had their whole focus. I relaxed back in my chair and took my time, enjoying the occasion. For the first time, they were treating me like an afterthought, ignoring me and dismissing me. They were starting to realize that the ground under them was changing and that they would soon discover their true identities. Undervalued Diaz, the quiet was oppressive, like a suffocating. I could feel the weight of each person's stare at that long mahogany table, even though the storm had not yet reached its full fury. Eyes flitting between me and the company's CEO, Richard Connors. Camille's relatives had been frantically in an attempt to impress. I remained motionless and silent, allowing the tension to build. Allow them to linger in the ambiguity and savor the initial shards of doubt. The first to cry was Camille. Her smirk vanished, and her fingers curled into fists against the sharp Her face was pale from the white tablecloth, and she parted her lips as she tried to think of anything to say. Gerald Ever, the businessman, turned to Richard and straightened his stance with a stiff laugh. "You must be," he said. "This is just my fault," with a slight stutter in his voice as it attempted its typical command. Richard didn't seem convinced. By Ved, and his piercing eyes flicked back to me. "Son-in-law? He has nothing. Furrowed, you didn't tell them, did you?" I smirked as I slowly breathed. Take shape as I leaned forward and put my elbows on the table to finally engage. My supervisor informed my unfaithful wife. "Yes, darling, I've already prepared his notice of termination and taken all necessary actions. From him, his family, and his career." She chuckled, saying, "I've been dreaming of getting rid of that loser for so long." Reality hit me like a knife, shattering my world. But years later, I changed into someone completely different, wealthy, powerful, and prepared to bring their destruction down upon them. There are times in life when everything changes and all you can do is watch your life crumble into dust. For me, that was the day I entered my boss's office prepared for what I thought would be a straightforward meeting. But instead, I heard the conversation that ended my life. "Yes, darling." My boss's voice came through the half-open door, smooth and condescending. "I've already prepared his termination notice. I've taken everything from him, his job, his family." Then laughter, her laughter, my wife's voice. "Rachel, I've been dreaming of getting rid of that loser for a very long time." She giggled. My chest tightened, and my vision blurred as I stepped forward, my hands shaking. I had no idea why I pushed open the door, and the people I had trusted the most, my wife and my boss, had plotted against me. They turned in shock, but only momentarily. And then my boss grinned at Rachel, who didn't even appear guilty, David. My boss smirked as he said, "You're firing me?" "Oh, David, not just firing you, I'm making sure you never work in this industry again." "What the hell is going on?" my boss said, leaning back in his chair. "I was just talking about you," I said, and my throat tightened. Rachel sighed, frustrated as if I were the burden she couldn't wait to drop. "You really are clueless, aren't you?" she sneered. I felt like the floor was collapsing beneath me. But why my voice came out? She walked around the desk, leaned down, and kissed my boss directly in front of me. Within an hour, I lost everything. My job was fired, I was blacklisted, I had no chance of working in my field again, and my marriage was ruined. Rachel laughed. "Because I don't love you, you idiot, I never did. You were just a stepping stone." It wasn't just a betrayal, it was a calculated takedown. Rachel and my boss had been planning this for months or even years, and the worst part was that I had loved her and trusted them both. The days that followed were a blur. I went from a respected professional to a nobody. I begged for jobs, but every company I applied to mysteriously rejected me. Rachel filed for divorce the same day my home because she had already prepared everything legally. My boss had done all in his power to destroy me. I stayed in a cheap motel, ate fast food and instant noodles, and Rachel moved into my boss's mansion without a care in the world. For a long time, I felt like I was nothing. But then something inside of me decided that I wasn't going to beg, that I wasn't going to crawl back, that I was going to rebuild, and that one day, when they least expected it, I would burn their world to the ground. I left town for 5 years, and when I returned, I was completely different from what I had done in those 5 years. I started from nothing, worked low-paying jobs, learned everything I could about business investing and power. After risking everything on a startup investment firm, I made 6 figures in 2 years, and by year 5, I was a multimillionaire. I also developed a network, established allies in high places, and connected with influential individuals, media moguls, politicians, and CEOs. I discovered how true power operated. 3, planned my retaliation, and I never forgot that every dollar I made and every accomplishment I made were all for the same goal: to reclaim everything they had stolen from me and destroy them. I returned to the city as someone else, a successful investor, a formidable businessman, and the ideal tool for retaliation. Step 1: taking his company. My former boss didn't know who I was. He was still rich, successful, and content, believing he had won. However, he was unaware that I had already started purchasing stock in his business, gradually gaining control until I eventually became his boss. And when I finally entered his office, he almost suffered a heart attack. David stumbled and I grinned. It was Mr. Carter.